da 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 Batman! Alright. A lot of people are reviewing this movie, I figure I might as well review it too. So, Lego Batman movie. First, I'm gonna break down what I'm gonna do with this review. I'm gonna tell you my overall impression, what I like, didn't like, final thoughts, that stuff. So, overall impression, it's hilarious, it's exciting, and it's gorgeous. So, in that regard, it fulfills all the promises it makes. And definitely is worth a watch, definitely is enjoyable, definitely is a great movie to go to the theater and see. A lot of people were laughing at it, a lot of people were excited, few people were crying at some of the sadder scenes. And so, in that regard, it's a great movie. It's very much a worthy follow-up to the Lego movie in the way it does its humor, and it's got a lot of spectacle of its own, too. It's an interesting case in which the Lego movie was designed specifically to focus on building and celebrating the brand. So they actually adhered to the rule where if a minifigure couldn't do something in reality, it can't do it in the Lego movie. Not here at all. Here their standard rule seems to be celebrate Batman. And so you have an art design that works for Batman. So he does, in fact, contort his mask. He does, as you see, do a sidekick to send Alfred flying. And there's other such fighting moves in this film as well. And that's nice. It sets this movie apart, and I'll be honest, I wish actual Lego minifigures could do that. I think they're very iconic and charming, but they're due for an upgrade. I mean, if you're gonna adapt stuff like Lego Batman, or Lego Ninja Turtles, or Lego Ninjago, I mean, Ninjago's an original property, but I mean, that sort of stuff is begging to be able to stage good fight scenes with, and I think that's one of the reasons in recent years Mega Bloks has gone from common punching bag as a cheap imitation of Lego to a very worthy competitor, because they've gone and overhauled their minifigures so they can actually move in a lot of ways like miniature action figures. I think they actually call them miniature action figures now, and so that works better for stuff like Ninja Turtles, where you want to stage fight scenes, and so that's something to consider in the near future. But I mean, even if Lego Batman, its actual figure, can't do a sidekick or any other fancy acrobatics, his actual self in the movie can, so that's fine by me. So, great visuals in this film, really. And the humor, I mean, I'm not gonna spoil too much of it, but I'll say this in the movie's favor. If you figured that because of how many trailers and TV spots you were watching, you would have this movie spoiled for you, luckily you'd be wrong, because this movie's trailers and TV spots were actually a little bit deceptive. I mean, the stuff's in the movie, but they're selectively edited to jumble up the continuity and put some jokes in places where they weren't originally, or rather aren't actually the movie, and so it does feel fresh when you actually see it, because you really don't see the twists coming in this movie. And that's where we have to get into the big twist that's in this movie, and what I think could be considered its greatest misstep. And, I mean, this is going to be debatable, obviously, it's subjective, but I think it's a valid opinion. And so, spoilers from here. If you've already read or heard other reviews, chances are this stuff has already been spoiled for you. But the big twist in this movie is that they invited a lot of guest villains, like non-Batman villains, to go and tear things up in Gotham City. And it's like they got Eye of Sauron, they've got what's his name? Crap. Voldemort. I don't know much about Harry Potter. I know there's a guy called Voldemort in it, and he's a villain, but its name took me a while. They've got Jurassic Park dinosaurs. They've got King Kong. King Kong isn't even a villain, in my opinion. I think that's a bad misrepresentation of the character. They got a lot of stuff that you've seen already in LEGO Dimensions or past LEGO themes. And this, I'll be honest, actually, I would love this sort of stuff if it had happened in the LEGO movie. That sort of crossover melee would have been amazing to see in a film with a more open focus. The problem is that this film, I guess you could say the bit about the trailers misleading you and then you're going to be surprised, that's a double-edged sword. Because if I recall correctly, the very first trailer of this film specified that the big difference between it and the first LEGO movie is that this one focuses in on Batman. And then you've got other trailers where they show you all these goofy villains from Batman's past, like Crazy Quilt, Killer Moth, Polka Dot Man, Zebra Man, Orca, Condiment King, and Two-Face actually played by Billy D. Williams, finally. You think this is going to be a wonderful tribute to Batman that really gives attention to all these goofy elements of the past. And when I read the reviews that spoiled for me that there'd be guest villains, I figured, oh, great, false advertising. These guys aren't going to... This movie isn't going to focus enough on the actual Batman villains. Well, as it turns out, I was partially right and partially wrong. This movie does give a bigger role to the actual Batman villains than I thought it would after reading those other reviews. At the same time, I think it's not a big enough role. And the thing about these guest villains, the non-Batman villains, that surprised me is that when I read the reviews spoiling that part of the movie, I figured, well, that's a misstep, but it's probably just going to be a last act twist where they do a bit kind of like Blazing Saddles, where the walls between worlds all collapse and they all get in, invade the city, and have a big fat fight. No, this stuff comes in maybe mid-movie, and then it becomes the plot. Basically, I mean, I might as well go to explain it. The plot is Batman wants to exile Joker to the Phantom Zone as used in Superman to imprison Zod. And that's Joker's plan all along, too, and you really have to sort of just go with this stuff, regardless of whether the plan is viable. Like, you're just supposed to expect that Joker somehow knows Batman is going to exile him to the Phantom Zone, and he's thinking one step ahead. And then Joker summons all these other villains from the Phantom Zone, they escape, and again, it really is forced. For one thing, these villains imprisoned in DC Comics' Phantom Zone, they aren't DC villains. They're villains from a bunch of other properties. Again, it really feels like a hawking of LEGO Dimensions. And also, when Joker breaks them out of the Phantom Zone and they ravage Gotham City, you're just supposed to accept that these guys just go along with his plan. Like, suddenly now they're free, they think they somehow owe Joker, and they're gonna participate in his plan to rampage through Gotham just to spite Batman instead of going and following their own agendas. It really is forced, and that's the thing about this movie. This movie obeys rule of funny and rule of cool to the detriment of everything else. And that might be okay for some people. It was pretty okay for me while I was watching. But you might have seen this even in the original trailers and remarked upon it. Like, you got the bit where Batman is reminiscing around the family photo, and Alfred calls back to all the past Batman things, like right on down to the 1960s Batman TV series, and also you get a shot of bat nipples. And all that stuff is really funny. The issue is that it doesn't work from a plot perspective because we've already seen that Batman knows Robin and Batgirl in some of those incarnations, and yet this movie treats him as meeting them for the first time. So the two things cannot be true at once. He either remembers that stuff, or he doesn't remember that stuff. So, again, it's forced, and unfortunately there's a lot more stuff in this movie that feels forced when you look at it the right way. And so that brings us back to the whole crossover melee. I don't think those villains belong in a movie that's supposed to be focused on Batman and paying homage to his past adventures. They don't supplant the actual Batman villains to the extent that I feared, but they supplant them past the extent that I would have liked. And so, now all that said, it's still hilarious and still exciting. I mean, the point where the villains from a bunch of other franchises go on rampage, and Gotham erupts in flames, and Batman has to escape with his friends in a bat plane, it looks gorgeous. I mean, it's got this awesome black and orange color palette that they're zooming through with a bunch of stuff exploding, falling apart, fire all over the place. It looks like it's a straight-up homage to the Bruce Timm Batman animated series, and that is awesome. I mean, I say these villains don't belong in a Batman movie, but the action scene they lead to definitely does. It looks like a Batman movie. In spite of all else, these scenes really do feel right at home. And so does the bit about Batman being motivated, ultimately, by the fact that he misses his parents, that's what makes Batman tick. This movie keeps that bit of his character pretty much intact, even if it plays around with him in a lot of other ways. Now, at the same time, this feels a little bit contradictory to the whole jokey way it treats good versus evil, whereas Batman is somehow haunted by the death of his parents. He's also got a sort of nonchalant attitude towards fighting evil. I mean, it's his job, it's his villain's job, it's just something they do. They just come to expect that everything's gonna work out, and they both go home at the end of the day. And so those two things don't really add up. I mean, it doesn't bother me while I'm watching this movie, and probably won't bother a lot of other people, but from a writer's perspective, they don't add up well. Now, all this said, I am pro-silly Batman. I mean, I won't go into my reasons, because they're kind of controversial, but I've really given up on the whole taking these universes seriously thing. I have my reasons for why I can't take Batman seriously anymore, and that applies to a lesser extent to other superheroes as well. And that's not going to change up until I feel some things at the very basic level of how they treat these universes changes. Until then, I would much rather see it treated in a very silly manner. And so, as a comedy, this movie succeeds. It's just that when it dips back into the whole Bruce misses his parents stuff, the two ideas conflict. And so, that's a bit of a problem. Now, for all this nitpicking I've spent several minutes doing, I want to stress again, this is me in film reviewer mode, and that's necessarily a different mode from film watcher mode. The film reviewer in me doesn't get to sit on the edge of his seat and be excited about the action going on screen and the bits with fire erupting everywhere and stuff crumbling and stuff getting reassembled into Lego models and all that stuff. So, when you don't have that thrill and that comedy, it's just time to think more about what's actually going on in this sort of movie from a plot perspective. But none of that is to say that you shouldn't go see this movie. I mean, you might have these nitpicks too, they might bother you more, they might bother you less, they might bother you not at all, but it doesn't matter. Go to this movie, you're going to have a great time if you like the Batman universe, you like the sort of action films, or the sort of action that it's in these Batman movies, the sort of visuals, you're going to like this stuff. And, I mean, even when it seems totally wrong, you're still going to laugh, you're still going to be excited. I mean, And I mean, I say this stuff doesn't belong in Batman movies like King Kong, The Wicked Witch of the West, Voldemort. But I mean, that's me thinking about this now, going into it, expecting an homage to actual Batman stuff. It's quite possible that when people look back on this in the future, among the pantheon of Batman movies that have gone into theaters, people are going to look back fondly and rightly say this is the only Batman movie you can see where he goes up against all these different crossover villains, and that's awesome. And I would agree, it's just that it's not my expectations, and so that's that. But still, very fun movie, very good homage to Batman. Now, I'm going to give you some brief spoilers about the particularly funny jokes. There's one joke about the name Dick Grayson, and it's not like these sorts of jokes are uncommon in DC properties, but I wasn't quite expecting it in a kid-centric movie, but it does do a joke, and the whole theater was roaring with laughter at this. I mean, well, maybe not the whole theater, but a lot of the adults and teenagers in the theaters were rolling with laughter at this, because it's just so funny. It's really fast, it's over quickly, but it is funny while it lasts. Oh, Robin rickrolls somebody. So, for what that's worth, that joke I could have done without. It was funny, I guess, but it's played out to me. But I did laugh quite a bit at it when it was happening. I wouldn't have put it in myself, but I did laugh. Also, as I said before, the fight scenes are really good. Oh, here's one more nitpick I have about this movie that I didn't get at it when I was nitpicking it before. I don't understand why they made Barbara Gordon an adult in this one. I mean, usually you think of her as being around the same age as Robin is. Here, she's an adult, she's the right age to replace her father as the commissioner of Gotham City, and they actually call attention to this when she suits up and she's dubbed Batgirl, and she says, well, if I'm Batgirl, can I call you Batboy? And I mean, it's a good point. Why is she Batgirl? I mean, I know Barbara's known as Batgirl when she's not known as Oracle, but she's an adult in this movie. And I mean, all this stuff could have been avoided if they just made her a kid. And I don't see how much things really would have changed if they made her a kid. I mean, some things would have changed. Overall, though, the character's role could have stayed the same. Because, I mean, they still play her as Batgirl, more or less. They couldn't have put Kathy Kane in and have her be Batwoman. They probably could have had Barbara be Batwoman, but they weren't going to go that route, obviously, because it would confuse people. So yeah, that's one more nitpick. It's pretty minor, but it's just a case where the choice they made is bizarre. And where, with a lot of the other choices they made, even if I'm not that crazy about them, they still made for a lot of good comedy and action. The bit with making Barbara an adult, I don't really get, honestly. And I mean, also, she's, oddly enough, a very important part of the movie and not in it that much. Or rather, Barbara's in it a lot, Batgirl is not. And since a lot of people going into this know she's going to be Batgirl, it doesn't make a lot of sense that she spends a lot of this movie not being Batgirl, if that makes any sense. But, okay, that's about it. Oh, the ending theme. You're gonna like it. The ending is charming. Just go see it, okay? Overall thoughts, I like this movie. You'll like this movie if you liked the Lego movie. If you like Batman, I mean, I guess it depends which Batman you like when it comes to recommending this, but I still think that you're going to find a lot you like about this movie in terms of callbacks. Maybe not enough, but you're going to laugh some. Alright, that's about it for this review. I do recommend it. Go see it in theaters, hopefully with a lot of other audiences, because it's fun to laugh and cheer in unison.